le guide du londonien.
LeGuide Channel.
Suivez le guide, votre Google.
I am the Director and CEO of Territory Global Security and Intelligence Consultant. We're based in the United Kingdom and we deal with soft and hard counter-terrorism strategies. When it comes to soft solutions, we are talking about preventing terrorism in the first place before it happens. We've had a lot of young Africans, and young people from the black and Asian ethnic minority communities, traveling to Syria to become involved in terrorism. But what has been happening is there has been a gap where the African heritage communities have been ignored drastically in terms of the solutions that the government has been providing. So our organization is looking at the ignored communities of African heritage and trying to provide bespoke or tailor-made solutions to ensure that these young people have a solution that would suit preventing them from being radicalized in the UK and in Africa. The threat is enormous, because if you look at some of the individuals who have become involved in terrorism, i.e., if you look at the killers of Lee Rigby, talking about the Adebole and Adebolaje, if you look at Bruton Zamani, one of the young guys who admired, the killers of Lee Rigby, and then if you look at the Christmas Day bomber, Mohammed Omar, these are some of the individuals who have created, kind of a threat within the communities. And then what we have now is groups like Boko Haram, spreading to Cameroon, Boko Haram in Nigeria, Boko Haram going to Niger and Chad. So it's kind of a threat because most of these individuals, will one day come to the United Kingdom, come to the West, to become a threat to the government. More so because you have Libya, which is now a country which most people are not talking about. The government is focusing on Syria, but Libya is a threat because in Libya there is kind of no formal institution. So Libya is now an open route for most of these young militants, who are escaping from Boko Haram, running away from Al-Shabaab, and they're coming through to the boats. So there is a very high threat that all these young people in thousands. We're talking about 60,000 people coming through to the boats. It's a lot more difficult for the government, to know who has been a militant or who hasn't been a militant, who is a true refugee and who is not a true refugee, because there are no checks and balances within the restraints of the Italian borders. It's been overwhelming for the Italian government, and what they're doing now is they are not taking any fingerprints for these young people because what they've realized is if they take fingerprints, the law states that your first point of entry entitles you to seek asylum in that land. But because these young people don't want to stay in Italy, the Italian government is letting them loose. So we have a very significant amount of threat coming from the African Heritage Commission. The theme of the conference was preventing radicalization within the African heritage communities in the UK, in the EU, and in sub-Saharan Africa. So what we're saying is we have to ensure that the PREVENT program and the solutions which are being provided for Africans are not just provided by Africans, but are tailored to entitle, the Africans, to be able to get better solutions. So our organization is looking at the African specifics, looking and saying the process of radicalization within the African communities is very different and should be handled differently. And it was fantastic. We had, we brought people from Maiduguri. We brought Mama Boko Haram from Maiduguri. She's been a very, very powerful mediator with the Nigerian government, in terms of looking at some of the solutions and the way out strategy for these young people. We had Barrister Zana, one of the only individuals in Borno State who runs a school. We had people from America, we had people from Jonathan Paris coming from America, we had Brian Grimes, we had people from Norway, Tahir. So all these individuals came because they understand that there is a gap within the African communities. Africans should be able to solve their own problems. That's very key, because one of the things we realized when we went to Maiduguri and spoke to some of the individuals, you realize that, the modus operandi of Boko Haram is very cynical and complex. In the sense that, Boko Haram, for instance, in terms of recruiting, would move from door to door, asking parents, to do contributions by giving their children If they disobey, they kill them. This has been the strategy all along. So what happens is the military does not trust the community because, once the military apprehend a militant, they put the militant in jail. The next day, the militant is released by a politician who has been forced, to comply with some of the Boko Haram groups. So what that creates is an atmosphere of distrust within the community. So you have the militants who don't trust you have the police the army that don't trust the community. You have the community that don't trust the army. So you create a situation of complexity. The government has focused more on the military strategy. So by focusing on the military strategy without actually getting to understand the group is something which is wrong. And if you ask me directly, why is that? I'll say to you, understanding the organization and the organizational structure takes a very long time, and most African governments don't have that time. It's a very, very difficult area to comment on because most often you don't have traceable evidence to show that an organization is being sponsored by a state, for instance. But what you find is once you ask simple questions of where do they get their weapons from, you can get answers, because they must have weapons. They have weapons. They have the manufacturers of these weapons. Africa doesn't manufacture weapons. The European countries manufacture weapons. So if you want to look at it from that perspective, then there is no doubt that they are being sponsored by European governments. In 2013, 2014, they were classed as one of the most dangerous organizations, one of the most lethal, and one of the most richest, because they were classed the 10th richest organization terrorist organization in the world. So what you find is that most of these weapons that they have, some of them they've got them from from the armies, but most of their weapons they've got them from the West, because there are people who supply them with these weapons. It's not all the weapons that they got it from capturing from the soldiers. I mean, the solution, which is a long-term strategy, is not a red button solution. So by the current regime of Nigeria saying, we will use military force, we'll now transfer the army headquarters from Abuja to Maiduguri, doesn't really help the situation. The way forward is to understand Boko Haram has grown beyond the imaginations of everyone. Now they link it with ISIL. So the only way forward is to look at the dialogue aspects of it. By having a dialogue, because even the United Kingdom dialogue with the IRA, even the government of Sri Lanka had a dialogue with the Tamil Tigers, during the
yes, but the difference is the IRA, you would know who to talk to, or the Tamil Tiger in Sri Lanka, there were people that you could identify and have a dialogue with them. But Boko Haram is a normal citizen by day and the terrorists by night. How do you know? How do you identify them?
It makes a very good sense, because the IRA, the kind of nationalist organizations where, they had somebody that you can talk to. But what you find is that there are groups within Boko Haram who are willing to talk, and I'm sure that the government is aware, because some of these negotiations have been made previously, to talk to some of the groups, but the tactics by which you employ in talking to some of these groups is very important, because if you have trust within the people who want to ensure that these organizations disappear, then it's good. But mind you, there are individuals within the system who will not be happy to see that Boko Haram disappears. Because where there is chaos, there is opportunity. If you do not understand the structure of this organization, it would put you in a situation where you would always have butchers baking the bread. I mean, what we'll say is, it's very important that we come together as one in terms of understanding the intensity of which, the world has become today, in terms of looking at radicalization, why the young people step into the sphere of radicalization. Why do they join terrorist organizations? It's important to look at some of these drivers. Once you look at some of these drivers of radicalization, you look at the prevent aspect of it. Our organization is saying, how do you step in so that young people can step out of radicalization? It takes time, and it takes Africans to be able to solve their own problems. The key message is, let Africans have solutions that will solve African problems.
Suivez le guide, votre Google.